The latest Speedroid wave of supers have a very flawed design, and I'm here to expose and explain how so, going through each card one by one and ending with an overview of them and the state of Yu-Gi-Oh! Design philosophy as a whole. On February 15, 2025, Supreme Darkness brought us 5, definitely not that much dark, new cards. 2 Pendulum Monsters, 2 Synchros and 1 Trap. Speedroid Clackers is a level 2 Machine Pendulum Wind Monster with 200 attack and 1800 defense points. Its pendulum effect reads as follows. You can banish 1 Speedroid card from your graveyard, place 1 Speedroid Pendulum Monster from your deck in your Pendulum Zone. Also, you cannot special summon for the rest of this turn except Wind Monsters. You can only use this effect of Speedroid Clackers once per turn. The monster effects states that if this card on the field is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can special summon 1 Speedroid Clackers as a tuner from your hand, deck or graveyard. Doing damage calculation, if your clear winged monster battles while this card is face up in your extra deck, you can banish this card, and if you do, that monster gains 700 attack. You can only use each effect of Speedroid Clackers once per turn. The reason these effects might seem weird is because they are designed to only work with one other specific new card, called Speedroid Wing Synchron, the other new pendulum monster that we will see shortly. The main issue with this card begins in its nature. Being a pendulum monster in a Synchro deck partially based on graveyard summoning isn't a great start. Unlike all the other monsters in the deck that continue to generate value even after being sent to the graveyard, pendulums, once used, will sit rotting on top of your extra deck for the rest of the game. Speedroid Clacker tries to redeem itself with its last effect, activatable while face up on the extra deck, but ultimately fails to synergize with the rest of the deck, which is pretty ironic for an archetype that is supposed to represent the Synchro mechanic. The card's visual design isn't great either. Instead of creating a new dice monster or a toy-like creature, they decided to be the new guy-like monster, similar to Speedroid Huajikid and Speedroid Denden Daikuduk. They literally went with the dude guy design in a deck with living airplanes, toys are turned into giant weapons, and a dual-wielding swordsman riding a giant sword. This gave it a more generic and unrecognizable aspect, aggravated by the way too aggressive brightness, choice of colors, and unnecessary quantity of details that make it feel definitely out of place inside its own deck. If you took a look at all the Speedroid monsters without knowing any of them, you would almost certainly identify this one as the latest one. The same goes for all the other cards in this list, some more or less than others. Speedroid Wing Synchron is a level 5 machine, pendulum and tuner wind monster with 1500 attack and 1000 defense points. Here's its pendulum effect. Once per turn, you can destroy this card and 1 level 2 wind pendulum monster card in your pendulum zone, and if you do, special summon 1 clear wing Synchro Dragon from your extra deck. This is traded as a Synchro summon. Also, for the rest of this turn, cards in your pendulum zones cannot be destroyed by card effects, and you cannot special summon except wind monsters, followed by its monster effect. If this card is added to your extra deck face up, and you control 2 or more different types of wind synchro monsters, you can send 1 Speedroid Spell and Trap from your deck to the graveyard. You can only use this effect of Speedroid Wing Synchron once per turn. Another pendulum monster, another frustrating card to use. Starting with the pendulum effect, you can now see where the gimmick was going. By activating Clackers effect, you place this monster in the pendulum zone and then proceed to summon Clear Wing Synchro Dragon, specifically. There is however a target that would be more fitting to summon for a pendulum and synchro summon combined. Enter Speedroid's pendulum synchro monster, Clear Wing Fast Dragon. Isn't it odd that a synchro summon made with the pendulum scale brings out the non-pendulum version of the dimensional dragon? That is because Konami hates all strong cards like Clear Wing Fast Dragon and Clear Wing Synchro Dragon and wants you to stop using them. More about that later in the video. Back to Speedroid Wing Synchron, as you probably noticed, he is, in fact, part of the Synchron archetype. What does this add to both decks? Absolutely nothing. You will barely see this guy in a Speedroid duel, let alone in a Synchron one. The effects are anything but on the same wavelength as the other archetype, and they will serve you no use if played there. This remains consistent with an artwork that doesn't even resemble a Synchron monster, It looks way too futuristic, almost resembling a MacLeod monster or a toon version of Clearwing Synchro Dragon. Its face is also asymmetrical. It seems that whoever drew him was undecided whether to put it in a side or frontal view, and therefore placed his steel left cheek forward to show you that it was, in fact, not missing, making it loop-sided in process. This card shares all the same defects Colonel Clacker has, but still manages to get even worse. While the level 2 monster brings out a copy of itself after being destroyed, reducing the brick value inside the deck, which is perfect for my 1-card Stellar Windward Riot combo, given the levels left on the field at that moment, Speedroid Wing Synchron doesn't do any of that. If you draw it, it's a completely dead card unless you manage to draw or add Clackers to your hand. Its own purpose is being placed in the zone from the deck one single time in the entire duel. It's a completely brain dead combo. You will always do the same thing over and over again, duel after duel, without the slightest difference whatsoever. It isn't even good for pendulum summoning, the literal summoning mechanic they have written big on their text. That's because its pendulum scale, 4, is the worst they could give to this deck. It will be only good to summon Clearwing Fast Dragon back from the extra deck. That's obviously only if you manage to bring it out and use it in order to summon an even bigger Synchro, something you will definitely find no struggle to do. Summoning freaking number 1000 sounds less twisted than that. Its monster effect is basically inexistent and disadvantageous outside the new cards. First, it only activates when you control 2 or more different types of wind synchro monsters, which isn't hard to achieve, but it means that in order to use it, you will not be able to do its combo until you finish a different combo to summon something else, which could be blocked and waste resources. Then, the list of Speedroid cards that actually generates value in the graveyard is limited to Speedroid Duplicate and Clearwing Wonder, the new trap card we will see later, pushing in both cases not to use their trap effects and only use their graveyard effect, which means that this card pushes you not to use a part of the deck by skipping over the first effect of both traps, which is a huge waste given how good those cards actually are. Otherwise, you could set a roulette or scratch, which serve zero purpose in the graveyard. Lastly, it will never be a monster on your field. It can only be summoned by pendulum summoning it, which you won't be able to do since it's one of the only 2 Speedroid monsters you will use as actual pendulums. Normal summon is also out of the question. It will never leave the action deck after its combo. You don't want to play 2 copies because it's a break, and it could have just been a continuous spell for all it's worth as a monster. Speedroid Taketombo's effect is the only practical way that can summon it, but the deck already has better targets that need to be summoned in order to achieve anything significant. And if summoned that way, you will also permanently lose its pendulum effect, the only effect that makes it worth to even play in the first place. This is pretty sad given Speedroid's history of level manipulations and dice effects that, even with some milestones during combos, always made things different, challenging but ultimately rewarding. Speaking of level manipulation, the third card on the list is Hi-Speedroid Glider 2, a level 5 Synchro Machine Tuner wind monster with 1600 attack and with 2200 defense points. It requires 1 Wind Machine Tuner plus 1 or plus non-tuner monsters, and states that if this card is synchro summoned, you can target 1 level 7 or lower wind non-tuner synchro monster in your graveyard, special summon it. If your opponent special summons a monster and you control a Clearwing monster, except during the damage step, you can banish this card from your graveyard, increase the levels of all monsters or your opponent controls by 5. You can only use each effect of Hi-Speedroid Glider 2 once per turn. This monster follows the deck's tradition of grave summoning, allowing you to bring back any level 7 or lower wind non-tuner synchro monster, which will just be Clearwing Synchro Dragon 99% of the time, but fails to add anything significant or fun to your combo. Just one more brain dead effect that will do, in the same identical manner, every duel forever. The second effect is probably the only fun among all the new supports, but will activate only if you control a Clearwing monster, which is, apart from screwing with your opponent's synchros and XYZs, kinda questionable given the fact that the only 2 monsters that give a damn about level 5 or higher ones are Clearwing Synchro Dragon and Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon. You will never have Clear Wing on the field while Glider 2 is in the grave, so this effect basically assumes that you use it for Crystal Wing, but still requires a Clear Wing monster rather than a Synchro Dragon one to be controlled. This is probably just nitpicking, but I see a reflection of Konami's hate towards the old, more viable cards they themselves made. The artwork is also pretty brain dead. It's the most monochromatic monster ever. It's literally all green, like we didn't know we were playing a wind deck. Lastly, it's funny that I refer to Speedroid Glider, an old Speedroid pendulum, while giving you zero incentivized to play him or all the other pendulum monsters. The fourth card on this list is Crystal Clear Wing over Synchro Dragon, a level 12 Synchro Dragon monster who possesses 3500 attack and 3000 defense points, that I will just call over for obvious reasons. In order to be summoned, it's gonna require 2 or more tuners or 1 tuner Synchro monster plus Clear Wing Synchro Dragon, specifically. And here's what it does. Must be synchro summoned once per turn when another card or its effect is activated. Quick effect, you can negate the activation, and if you do, destroy that card. And if you destroy the monster, this card gains attack equal to that monster's original attack until the end of this turn. If this is a face-up synchro summoned card in its owner's control list field by an opponent's card, you can special summon one Clear Wing monster from your extra deck. Starting with the synchro materials, this card tries to be a lot of things, all at the same time, ultimately failing in every single one. In the 5Ds anime, we get introduced to 2 subcategories of synchro monsters, Double Tuning and Axel Synchro. These monsters differ from the others through their materials. Double Tuning, as the name suggests, requires 2 tuner monsters instead of 1, while Axel Synchro requires only synchro monsters, tuner and non-tuner alike, as materials. The prime representation of them being Red Nova Dragon for the Double Tuning and Shooting Star Dragon for the Axel Synchro. Both of these summoning mechanics possess evolutions such as triple or quadruple tuning, obviously requiring 3 or 4 tuners, and Delta Axel Synchro, reaching level 12 by combining 3 synchros together, or Limit Over Axel Synchro, as seen in the anime, by combining the maximum number of synchros at the time being 5. Main examples of this being in exact order: Supernova Dragon, Hypernova Dragon, TG Halberd Cannon, and Shooting Quasar Dragon. Over is a Shooting Quasar Dragon wannabe, an Axel Synchro, and even a Double Tuning, or technically more since they didn't even bother to put a limit to the number, giving it the potential to be summoned using 5 tuners and having the first quintuple tuning in the history of Yu-Gi-Oh!, making even Jack Atlas envious. Remaining on the tuner side, requiring both a Synchro tuner or 2 or plus tuner monsters at the same time slightly increases the versatility of the card, but completely destroys its identity in the process. Long gone are the times where synchro monsters used to actually have a unique summoning mechanics and required some thinking to be assembled and summoned. That's simply obsolete. Now everything must be able to do anything, all at the same time. Tuners that can stop being tuners, synchros made with only one monster on the field and the other in the hand, and the strongest monster of the whole summoning mechanic being cheated out using the Crimson Dragon, never to be summoned properly. That's modern synchros for you. Back to Over, the double tuning is basically pointless. You will summon it using Glider 2 99% of the time. That's just an empty reference lacking in substance. And somehow, it managed to get even worse with the last piece of material specifically being Clear Wing Synchro Dragon. That's a downgrade from every other dragon of the Wing family. Not even Odai's Wing Dragon, the weakest of them all, dares to specifically require the Dimensional Dragon. The reason for this requirement is pretty simple. Konami hates when whole anime decks already have strong, more viable ace monsters they themselves made, in this case being Clear Wing Fast Dragon and Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon, and they want you to stop using them. That's probably because they are overshadowing the less played, weaker cards they themselves made that way. While trying to revitalize the usage of a deck's icon isn't necessarily a bad thing, there are 2 main ways to do it. You either create an ambience that helps the overshadowed card shine more, or you try to take down the convenience of the strong ones, corroding synergy and fun in the process. You might guess what they choose. As if it weren't already inconvenient and or difficult enough to summon over using Crystal Wing, Crystal Clear Wing or Fast Dragon, they definitely didn't want to take that risk. Finally, this push covers a need that didn't even exist. Speedroid decklists have never ever been run without at least one copy of Clearwing Synchro Dragon, but that's a level of secret you can only access by playing the actual deck for more than 0 times. Going to the main effect next, you probably notice it being an almost complete ripoff of Shooting Quasar Dragon, adding the attack gains if the destroyed card is a monster and changing the summoned monster upon leaving the field to a Clearwing one, rather than Shooting Star Dragon. Hover also doesn't possess either the battle prowess of Crystal Wing nor the immunity of Crystal Clear Wing. This is the ultimate form of a Clear Wing, a generic Omni Negate with basically zero flavor. If it weren't for those 2 minor changes from Quasar, you couldn't even tell it was a member of the Clear Wing series in the first place. That is probably the worst effect I ever read, second only to Synchro One Way and Odice Wizard Dragon. The extra deck summoning upon leaving the field is barely even fun. To make it crystal clear why, I will explain it with an example using none other than Shooting Quasar Dragon. Let's say you're running it because you saw how cool it was in the anime, even if there are better alternatives, because of course there are, you still decided to play it, because it's that cool. Upon its removal from the field, it lets you summon Shooting Star Dragon directly from your extra deck. Here's its effects. Once per turn, you can excavate the top 5 cards on your deck, shuffle them back in, also discard the maximum number of attacks per battle phase this turn equals to the number of tuners excavated. Once per turn, when a card or effect is activated that would destroy a card on the field, quick effect, you can negate the effect, and if you do, destroy it. Once per turn, when an opponent's monster declares an attack, you can target the attacking monster, banish this card, and if you do, negate the attack. Once per turn, during the end phase, if this card was banished by its effect this turn, special summon this card. Focusing on the last one, you then proceed to banish it in order to negate an attack. During the end phase, you'd expect to activate its effect to summon itself back on the field, but you notice that you can't. That's because there is a ruling in Yu-Gi-Oh! Stating that if a monster isn't summoned from the extra deck face down properly, you will not be able to summon it again after it leaves the field. And that is simply a very annoying mechanic. There is nothing fun in this mechanic, it's just a pointless penalization, since most of these effects belong to cards and decks, mostly animal ones, that aren't even good in the first place. Fun fact, in the anime, Shooting Quasar Dragon included the part where the removal summon was treated as a synchro one. The same goes for all the other effects like the true Stardust Dragon summoning traps. But, as if all these cards weren't already bad enough, they simply got rid of those parts, for some reason. This brings us back to Over. In the process of this effect creation, that being copy-pasted Shooting Quasars, they either didn't even bother to fix its main issue or they thought it was a good and fun idea to leave it that way. There's a small pool of potential targets you can summon, each with its own flaws. Clearwing Synchro Dragon is the only one of the bunch that doesn't get nerfed if summoned this way, but is also one, if not the worst target, and it will almost certainly be in the graveyard when the effect takes place. Supreme King Dragon Clearwing will not be able to use its powerful effect of destruction upon Synchro summon, making him another terrible target. Hi-Speedroid Glider Rider won't be able to use its Synchro summoner effect of leaving the field in order to bring out Clearwing Synchro Dragon and Clearwing Fast Dragon, practically being useless alongside Supreme King Dragon Clearwing, unless you're certain that, as a monster with 0 immunities and defenses, it will survive until next turn. Clearwing Fast Dragon is one of the only true good targets given its strong and quick effect. The problem is, as always, in its pendulum nature. If destroyed, it will go and occupy the pendulum zone, where it will rot for the rest of the duel because, since it wasn't summoned properly, you will not be able to summon him back with his own pendulum effect. The same goes if you let him go face up on the extra deck, since the deck has zero effect that could return it there face down. Lastly, we got Crystal Clearwing Synchro Dragon, the only other good target of this effect. You have to keep in mind that you won't be able to add a wind monster from your deck to your hand upon its sending to the graveyard. On a side note, it's interesting how you can summon Clearwing's Supreme King version, a card that has no business with the deck whatsoever, but you're locked out of Crystal Wing, probably the best target it would have had, even if its own name is literally on overs. They really don't want you to play that card in its own deck. Going over its design, it's one if not the worst design ever in Yu-Gi-Oh! History. Starting with the background, behind the monster, it's a scribble of highlighter blue lines that completely kills any sort of attempt to make an immersive view. Another punch in the eye is the presence of those 6 giant ugly Xyz materials floating around and occupying a third of the artwork, followed by the rockiest possible trail ever, also made with the same pole highlighter effect that lacks any 3-dimensionality. I call them Xyz materials because that's the first thing that came to mind when looked at. They're even of the same color with the same trail. The only significant difference is the shape being spiked rather than round. This is not the first card to have them around. Shooting Majestic Star Dragon has them too, and I don't like it either. I do not care if they represent the non-tuner levels used for the summon, which would be wrong since there are only 6 stars, while Clearwing is a 7-star monster. They are not even pleasant to see and shouldn't be even present after the monster is summoned. None of the old artworks have them. The Synchro circles aren't any better. Unlike all the other previous artworks, they lack any sort of 3-dimensionality and perspective, resulting in a much lower quality copy-paste of the same circle on itself, multiple times, at the point of becoming a complete visual clutter. Also, the number of circles is wrong. Again. The tiny little stars on the top right and left missing in all the rest of their artwork, for some reason, and made with the exact color of the ugly blue trails certainly do not help. But now, it is time to address the elephant in the room, that being the monster itself. Unlike its other level 12 counterparts, it appears in a static 3-dimensional frontal pose, to the point that they had to tilt its head to one side to avoid creating a total visual mess. That's a complete downgrade from all the other artworks. The posture doesn't offer a proper representation of its wings, the main theme of the entire archetype. They are covered and overshadowed by all the shiny effects, and almost half of them are cut out of the image completely. From this perspective, the top right and top left shoulder wings seem to be the main focus, creating a negative feeling given their tiny size. Speaking of the pose, the tail doesn't have the infinite form unlike Crystal Clearwings, for some reason, nor any interesting pose in the first place, losing a lot of charm. It also lost all the active greenish segments, downgraded to a turn-off version like the original Clearwing. Shifting to the main body, it's easy to see how over-detailed it is. Especially on a tiny piece of card, it's completely impossible to get a clear focus on anything. There are too many traits, colors, of questionable appearance, and different parts to the point where it gets tiring just to look at it. The red is completely out of place and absolutely horrendous, and so is all the gold stuff. The colors are too bright and out of place to belong to a Clearwing series. On the last note, there is something wrong with its fingers. After evolving to obtain opposable thumbs as seen in Crystal Wing and Crystal Clearwing, the predecessor of this card, the fingers are back to being 6 and unopposable for some reason. It doesn't help that the nails on the left side are white, while the ones on the right side are gold-like. At first, I thought they completely forgot to color them, so I went to see the mastered words design. There, the nails appear as slightly or yellowish, which could mean 2 things. They always appear that way, or they have been changed in the game's artwork. Finally, I tried to look at my own physical copy, but the small size of the card and its bright, ultra-rare reflection have made it more than difficult to establish with certainty what's the case. Giving it the benefit of the doubt and taking the best alternative as the real one, The fact that the drawing has such a bad lighting that not only it made me assume it's incomplete, but it doesn't even match with the giant excess materials scattered around is alone enough to declare it a complete failure of a visual design. Over is the epitome of quantity over quality. It's baffling how they reference already existing cards to the point of complete copy-pasting until doing so requires extra skill, at which point they completely abandon the idea. They prefer taking Crystal Clearwing Synchro Dragon, slams tons of random details on top of him, rather than take the time and effort it needs to create an actual new and good design. But why complain though? They put the word over in its already painfully long name. Do you get the reference? It doesn't matter if over doesn't require 3 synchros in order to be summoned, let alone 5, and it's just an access synchro. Don't you feel the joy and nostalgia? The last card of the bunch is a normal trap card called Hi-Speedroid Glider Wonder. Upon reading its name, you may ask, is it an intriguing effect? Maybe some dice or gambling effect perhaps? What's so wonderful about it? And the answer would be absolutely nothing. Its effect reads as follows. Target cards your opponent controls up to the number of different monster types among the wind synchro monsters you control. Destroy them. If your opponent special summons are monsters, except during the damage step, you can banish this card from the graveyard. Then target one wind synchro monster you control, banish it, then return it to the field. You can only use each effect of Hi-Speedroid Glider Wonder once per turn. While this card's first effect is clearly inspired by Hi-Speedroid Glider, given by its presence inside the artwork, the requirements for destruction are odd to say the least. Instead of throwing a dice and or shuffling back into the deck wind monsters, you can destroy cards your opponent controls based on the different type of synchro monsters you control. That is, in a deck known to only have 2 different monster types and only the dragons as first turn bosses. This pushes you to branch out of the deck, something a card should never do in a game based mostly on archetypes. As always, it only gets worse. While the second effect exploits a ruling in a very creative way, refreshing the monster effect, its requirements and resolution make it so that they basically reset one monster to regain an extra negate. And that's it. Nothing creative nor wonderful about this card, just a boring and generic destruction effect and an extra negate. The artwork isn't any better. They took an old unknown commercial animation of Hugo and Clearwing, not even a scene from the anime, and made it into a card drawing, adding the Hi-Speedroid Glider details on the D-wheel and changing Clearwing Synchro Dragon into his spectre-like form. I will now list various and more generic defects all these cards carry and why they are flawed to the core. Number 1. Laziness. Among the new supports, only Speedroid Colonel Clackers owns an actual new visual design. All the other cards are either variants or versions of already existing ones, with Speedroid Glider Wonder being an almost complete ripoff of a TV commercial. Number 2. Hollowness. If you took the names and restrictions out of all the 5 supports, you wouldn't even be able to recognize what deck they belong to. They are completely disconnected from the rest, and you will use them not more than once, and it will always be the same. Their effects are purely hollow metaslop, without the slightest trace of identity. No dices, no effects that feel fast, nothing. Nowadays the combos write themselves, you just need to read which card brings out which. Forget the old times where cards used to have an actual synergy that required you to think through your moves. Number 3. Boringness. Even if really similar to Hollowness, it's important to note that none of these new engines' effects feels fun nor satisfying to play, the only exception of this being Hi-Speedroid Glider Choose Level Riser. It can twist your opponent's combo in a way that isn't simply negating the life out of him. Number 4. Negligence. Nowadays it is clearer than ever when whoever is behind the card's creation likes the archetype he is working on or not. If the guy behind likes the deck, you may get Link monsters with 5 or 6 as Link rating, 5000 attack beaters, a rank 13 boss, completely unaffected giants with way too much attack points or quick removal effects, Omni negates that banish instead of destroying, or absolutely busted monsters that are combo and bosses at the same time, all with good design, inspired effects and even too much care and numbers of new cards being printed. On the other side of the coin, if they couldn't care less about your deck, all of a sudden the design shifts. Link monsters that don't help their archetype either because they're too expensive or just mediocre, not so strong beaters, from completely unaffected by other cards' effect to unaffected to your opponent's activated effects, or maybe only monster effects. Boss monsters when you need combo cards, or combo cards when you need bosses. They can and will just create a completely useless card of the archetype designed specifically for some meta slot deck. Or even worse, something so good it gets banned, damaging your already weak deck in the process, because no one could bother to pay it attention in the mythical playtest team that might not even exist. Last but not least, instead of getting tons of cards, you will be lucky if you get even one, and you better hope it's good because you won't get any more than that for the next 4 to 8 years. But don't you worry, because if you manage to avoid all of that, but your deck is from the anime, there's still a huge chance they will try to revitalize one of its old garbage mechanics no one cared about, and or just recycle the same few monsters again and again with the third or even the fourth version, retrain, or God only knows what else. All of this instead of resolving its fundamental and more important problems, easy to spot if you run it more than once. It's really unfortunate the state of which Yu-Gi-Oh! Designs as a whole has fallen in the recent years, but at least you now have a proper understanding of how the Speedroid supports are the worst of the kind. Have a good night.